Welcome to Good Game, the show for gamers by gamers. I'm Hex.
And I'm Barjo.
How's your mouse finger badge?
I don't think I can feel any feeling in my finger anymore. The Diablo III closed beta dropped last week, so we've been happily clicking through its depths.
It is wonderful to be Diabloing again after all these years.
This magic is nothing. I need to hold out a little longer.
So far, the beta is pretty awesome.
It's very short though, at about 2 hours of gameplay exploring around New Tristram and some nearby crypts with one big boss at the end.
Ah, the Skeleton King, yes. You'll have to move pretty quickly, otherwise he'll cleave you in two. Luckily, my monk has a super cool dash.
I love jumping about the place. I love the barbarian jump. I'd be like, whoa, I'm up here. What are you guys doing down there? And you guys were like,
How were we?
When you first walk into New Tristram and that music swells, it's wonderful. But also, all the sound in this game is quite incredible. It's nice to have Diablo and surround sound, but every single hit has weight to it, you know? It's quite... And you just want to smash everything in case there's loot inside. And, you know, Blizzard pretty much invented the click RPG genre, and they do a good job of drip-feeding you gear, even in these short 2 hours that we played.
I loved how it instantly felt nostalgic, even though it has this slick new graphics engine. And hearing the original voice actor for Deckard Cain will instantly bring a smile to your face.
He was driven mad by Diablo's evil.
It's a bit of a shame the beta doesn't let you alter the difficulty at all, because it is super easy. Even when you join with friends and everything kind of scales up a bit, you can just wander off and you'll never really be in trouble unless you encounter those purple snake things. Ouch. Hate those snakes.
It doesn't really feel like a beta though, does it? Because it is so easy and so short, it feels a bit more like a demo to get us excited for it. But it does give you up to 10 character slots, so you can test out all the different characters, and some of these character animations are so cool. Sometimes you just want to stand there and show off to everyone what you can do. Look at my new skill!
Show off.
Because this is only the starting area, we couldn't find much strategy because it didn't really matter which skills I used, so hopefully that'll come in time.
Yeah, we'll have to wait for the full game like everyone else and judge it properly. But we have been kept busy with plenty of other games.
Yes, like the spiritual successor to Demon's Souls, Dark Souls.
And Goose will take us on an investigation of LA Noire developer Team Bondi.
But first, can you guess the game for this week? I say, Hex, go read the news.
Yeah, I don't mind if I do.
Good game.
Japanese gamers lucky enough to obtain a pre-release copy of From Software's masochistic RPG Dark Souls have been treated to a rather nasty surprise. Thanks to a function that allows players to invade each other's games, From Software sent out a horde of fully leveled black phantoms complete with maxed out stats to grief early players to prevent them from making any progress until the official release date.
Watch that shit!
Despite being refused classification back in August, House of the Dead Overkill Extended Cut for the PS3 will now be locally released after a successful appeal of the classification board's decision by Sega Australia. The game's new rating will be MA15+ for strong horror violence and strong coarse language without any alterations to the game's original content.
Okay, man, okay. You made progress here. You did good.
Another member of LulzSec, the group responsible for this year's PlayStation Network attack, has been arrested. 23-year-old Arizona resident Cody Kretzinger, known by the alias Recursion, was taken into custody by the FBI and charged with conspiracy and unauthorized impairment of a protected computer. If convicted, Kretzinger will face up to 15 years in jail. This arrest leaves just 2 LulzSec members still at large.
Good game.
Rock of Ages is a downloadable game for PC and 360 that combines tower defense strategy with ball rolling strategy, sort of like Super Monkey Ball, but a little bit more sophisticated than that, with competitive multiplayer and a humorous historical setting.
It's nice to see something a bit different for the ball rolling genre, which, let's face it, has been stagnant for quite a while. It's a genre. If you're a fan of the humour of Monty Python, then the humour in Rock of Ages will really resonate with you. It's all based around the Greek mythology of syphilis.
Sisyphus. Oh my god.
That's what I said. He was a king that was punished for having to roll a boulder up a hill for all eternity, only to watch it roll back down again and have to repeat the process. I love those cutscenes, Hex. They were just snappy and well designed and chock full of pop culture references.
This is Swine!
Yeah, some of which strayed from the historical theme a little bit.
You shall not pass!
But they all set the scene for each level really well. As you work your way through the ages, from ancient to medieval and beyond, you'll be required to navigate your boulder through a treacherous path riddled with obstacles to try and destroy the enemy gate. When playing against the AI, they'll be trying to destroy yours on an identical course. But of course, it's always more fun playing with a friend.
Of course. And here's where the tower defense comes in. As you roll through objects, you'll earn cash, which you can use to spend on defenses to slow the enemy down. These range from turrets to catapults, exploding barrels, and airships that will fire cannonballs.
My favourite were those bulls and elephants that would kind of bully your opponent off course. I just spent all my money on them and put a bunch of them in one spot, which wasn't the best strategy in retrospect, but it was just so funny knowing that next time you'd come rolling on through, then there'd be this stampede of elephants waiting for you.
Yeah, there's such a maniacal joy in setting up those traps for your opponent too. Some of the courses in the later maps get quite complicated with platforms that you have to bounce across and narrow pathways. It's tricky enough trying to get through it without falling off the edge just in itself. Add to that the wall of explosives that your opponent has laid out for you, and things can get pretty tricky.
Each level usually takes 3 rounds. You need to hit the enemy gate with enough force to crack it. But if you make it through the course quicker than your opponent, then you'll get a head start on the next round. And this is one thing that I felt could have been improved upon, Badge, because if in the first round one person gets ahead, then the game is virtually won right then and there. Because if one person has a time advantage, then there's virtually no way for the other person to try and make up the distance, unless, you know, your opponent royally screws up and falls off the map a bunch of times. I just felt like it needed some kind of a catch-up system to level out the playing field, and it would have made the races a lot more compelling, I think.
Yeah, but I did like that if your opponent starts rolling while you're still placing everything around, you can aim cannonballs right at them.
Yeah.
I have to say, I did find the controls on the 360 a bit fiddly though. Trying to place your turrets and stuff on squares, it just felt too sensitive, and it's only a minor annoyance, but it's still annoying.
If you don't want to waste your time or money on defences, you can also spend cash on armour for your boulder, which allows you to smash through defences more easily and also take hits without getting knocked off course. It just wasn't as fun though. For me, most of the fun in this game came from dreaming up ways to slow your opponent down by placing ridiculous obstacles in their path. And it was just so funny over voice chat hearing their cries of frustration as they encountered each annoying thing you placed in their way.
It's a difficult trade-off placing those defences too, isn't it? Because this is a race, so the object is to get through as fast as possible, but the only way you can earn cash to put your own defences down is to smash through objects. So it's a bit of a trade-off, and you have to make a judgment as you're going, depending on how the race is going.
Yeah, no matter which strategy you take, the game offers up some pretty cool moments and close calls. I remember after a particularly disheartening losing streak, my opponent actually came at that last gate too slowly and didn't hit it with enough force to crack it, allowing me to sweep in at the last moment with a rare but much needed victory.
I had a good time with it, Hex. I'm not a huge fan of ball rolling games. It's not something I'd voluntarily spend an entire night playing, but I think this is a well-made and well-designed game, so I'm giving it 6 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Yeah, I found the single-player campaign a bit of a yawn as well, but once I got in on that multiplayer, I was surprised by how much fun I had. You know, I found myself wanting to try out every single course and think up new strategies to try and outsmart my opponent, so I actually think this is quite a sophisticated game. I'm giving it 7.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
So many, to be honest, but I think the game that had the biggest effect on me and made me really want to work in games was GoldenEye on the N64. I'd grown up playing, you know, Super NES and Mega Drive, and I kind of put those things away back when I went to university, and you know, I thought I was going to become a journalist or something like that. discovered GoldenEye and I thought, holy crap, like in the 2 years that I've been away, I've gone from just like running left and right and jumping to now I am James Bond and I'm infiltrating a facility. It just like really caught my imagination and made me think, this is something that I want to be involved in.
Good game.
LA Noire was the biggest game ever to be made in Australia. Anticipated for 7 long years and distributed by the mighty Rockstar of Grand Theft Auto fame, it was released in May this year and was a critical and commercial success.
I have no recollection of the people I have killed.
You've got the wrong guy! LA Noire's developer, Team Bondi, led by the charismatic Brendan McNamara, were lauded as heroes of the local game industry, a group of world-beating game makers celebrated for creating such a unique and original masterpiece. But what was to come left Team Bondi abandoned by Rockstar and in the hands of administrators. Cracks began to appear almost a month into the game's release when it was claimed that over 100 ex-Team Bondi employees who worked on LA Noire weren't given any credit in the game.
Some of those people worked there for a period of years. Some were in quite high positions. Some had a significant impact on the end result. If the game was completed and you were there for the completion, you'd get a credit. It was very clear that if you weren't there for the completion, you didn't get a credit. People in the industry, in our industry, rely on that credit to, get another job in the industry.
Then there were allegations of poor workplace practices inside Team Bondi.
Probably like the peak of the hours for me was in one kind of really desperate milestone where I worked from 9 a.m. till midnight, 7 days a week for almost 3 weeks. When I first joined, I expected there to be long hours, but I never expected it to be more for like 50% or, even 100% more.
Can you account for your movements last night?
I was here all night, of course, waiting for Adrian to come home.
It was never kind of mandated that you must work 100-hour weeks. It was kind of expected, definitely encouraged.
Further allegations surfaced that involved unpaid overtime and a high turnover of staff.
None of the weekday overtime was compensated. Sometime during my tenure there, they announced a scheme where you would be compensated for hours you worked on the weekends. Primarily people that did not get to the end of the project not paid, full stop.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sure my lawyer can clear all this up.
There was a lot of turnover, quite a lot of people left. I remember in a meeting once, there's probably about 20-25 of us, I looked around and realised that out of everybody there except from my lead, I'd been there the longest, and I'd only been there for less than 12 months.
It was good working with you, son.
If you spoke with these kind of issues about management, you were just basically told that this is the way the industry is, this is the way it works, you just have to get used to it. It's a privilege to be working for us on such a, on a AAA title in Sydney.
So is Team Bondi just the victim of a couple of disgruntled ex-employees who have unrealistic expectations of the game industry? Brendan McNamara seems to think so.
If you wanted to do a 9-to-5 job, you'd be in another business. Whether it's in London or New York or wherever, you're competing against the best people in the world at what they do. And you just have to be prepared to do what you have to do to compete against those people.
And he wasn't alone. Other Team Bondi employees publicly supported their employer and discounted the allegations on forums and blogs.
I can't say that no one ever worked 100 hours per week, but those sorts of hours were not encouraged. In fact, if someone on my team was working that hard, I would have done my best to stop them.
I've never heard of anybody not having his weekend paid, even if he has left the company before the end of the project.
Mistakes were made along the way, but I wouldn't expect a brand new company with new staff, new IP, and a new game engine to get things perfect.
Brendan McNamara and the employees that supported him have declined our offer to appear on camera for this story.
You don't ask, you never find out.
Shortly after the allegations were made against Team Bondi, the International Game Developers Association stated it would conduct an investigation. The IGDA is an organisation serving game developers and its membership is voluntary. In Australia, there are 2 more industry organisations. The Games Developers Association of Australia, which supports developers, and the Interactive Games and Entertainment Association, which represents the distributors and publishers. None of these industry organisations were willing to comment on the ramifications of the Team Bondi situation.
Well, young Phelps, you win some and you lose some in police work.
The power of these organisations can kind of rest in the lobbying or the publicity that they can give for workers and their rights. But having said that, they only provide guidelines and standards. They're not enforced. So unfortunately, bad workplace practices can still occur.
So without a union or regulatory body with power and accountability, where can the devs go to look for help?
Just like any other industry, the government should police that kind of thing, and there has to be standards. There has to be someone that is more educated than yourself, than myself, that knows what the rights are so that the rights can be enforced.
The department needs heroes. A shining, honest face the public can admire. I applaud a man with your talent for unwavering justice.
Team Bondi is not the first development studio to be faced with ex-employee allegations. In 2004, a campaign led by the fiancé of a developer employed by Electronic Arts harshly criticised the company's workplace practices, and class action lawsuits followed. In 2010, a band of developers' wives at Rockstar San Diego posted online about the degrading work conditions their spouses had to endure during the development of Red Dead Redemption. But what actual impact did these allegations have on the closure of Team Bondi?
Basically, Team Bondi's closure coincides with some broader trends within Australia's video game industry. The first big one would have to be the growing risk averseness that's occurred since the GFC. And since the GFC, big publishers such as Rockstar have become increasingly risk averse to actually investing and developing big budget games. In Australia, there are a few other factors added into that. The first one is the strong Australian dollar, so it makes it a bit more expensive to produce games. So it makes us less competitive on the world market. Up until recently, there's been a lack of industry assistance. So the closure of Team Bondi sort of is symptomatic of all of these trends. The bad press that they got for the working conditions amongst the staff certainly didn't help. And ultimately, it could make big game publishers such as Rockstar more wary of investing in Australia due to the bad press.
Whilst what remains of Team Bondi now in the hands of its administrators and LA Noire owned by Rockstar, Brendan McNamara and his remaining employees have found work, setting up camp with a company owned by filmmaker George Miller, famous for making Happy Feet and Mad Max.
You're beautiful. Only on the outside.
What their next project will be has yet to be announced. The tale of Team Bondi is ultimately one of regret and what could have been. Let's hope that in the end, it's the brilliance and originality of LA Noire that becomes the legacy, and not the issues which befell the company that made it.
Cause I always kill the things I love.
Okay, Hex, you know I've been playing Dark Souls, and I'm going to demonstrate what it's like playing that game right now, so I think it might be best if you leave because it's not going to be pretty.
Okay, well, message me if you need support.
I will. Let's do this. I think it's safe to say that generally the default difficulty for most games nowadays is getting easier, but there was one game which made difficulty its defining feature, and that was Demon's Souls. A game with such a cult following that every time the developer, From Software, even hints at shutting down the servers, there's an outcry from fans. And it makes sense, that community has bled for that game. And now it's time to bleed again with its spiritual successor, Dark Souls. If you've played Demon's Souls, then I'll probably cover some stuff here that you might be already familiar with, but bear with me. Dark Souls starts out with a big fantasy cutscene that has some dragons. And then it lets you take control of your damned self in an asylum for the undead. After a few very basic tutorials, pretty much just words scrawled on the floor, you're then faced with a foe that you can't initially beat, just like the last game. Eventually you gear up enough to take it down, and then a giant crow plucks you out of the world and takes you to a medieval-like village, which is where your story really begins. At the very start, you've got two directions you can take. Left will take you to some catacombs filled with some very tough skellies, and realistically, it'll be a while before you can go down there safely. I tried a lot and died a lot. On the right is a far more manageable area, which is a medieval village-type zone. Sprinkled around the world are bonfires, which act as your checkpoints, and a place you can repair and reinforce gear later on too. However, they also replenish every single enemy that's not a boss, so you can't just use them willy-nilly. The bonfires remove the need to have a nexus or hub world, which was in Demon's Souls, and that means that Dark Souls is an open world game. If you wander too far the wrong way, you might get stuck in a hard area for a while and generally have no idea if the boss in front of you is even beatable. I think this will be the first early rage quit point for people because the game doesn't do a good job of telegraphing where you should go. It really is much more rewarding avoiding using a walkthrough or a wiki if you can help it, at least until you reach that point where you just can't take it anymore. Dark Souls is a spiritual journey, not only for your character, but also for you as a gamer. It's an incher. You always need to move slowly and carefully with your shield up, going around every single corner. If you try and rush it, it's just completely counterproductive, and you'll just die again and again and again. And again. Very occasionally, you'll open a door or kick down a ladder that opens up a shortcut to another area that you've cleared. So suddenly, much to your relief, everything will feel familiar again and you can take a breath for a second. One thing Dark Souls doesn't do very well at all is teach you the bare basics of how to fight. A few text boxes in the opening level just isn't enough, and some may say that's part of the difficulty, that's part of the game, but I actually think it's a bit of an oversight from the developer because not giving you the basic tools in a game that's hard enough as it is already just means a whole bunch of newcomers won't get very far in this. Many a gamer has been known to rage quit Demon's Souls, and I think the same will be here, and it's such a shame because no other game does swordplay this good. You have an exciting lunge, a light and heavy attack, a block which you'll have up for most of the game. You also have a kick, which I found a little useless and hard to pull off in the middle of combat. And for experts, you have the parry, which you can follow up with an incredibly powerful riposte. Timing a parry is tough. It's no quick time event, and it will often go wrong, but it's definitely the best way to take down an enemy if you can get good at it. Also, if you're in a tight space, you can't really use a polearm or a giant sword, especially if you're going to wield that in two hands, because you're just going to hit the walls. So taking your combat environment into consideration is very important, especially if you're fighting hordes of enemies, such as zombies. On top of all that, some enemies are suited to different types of weapons as well, depending on what sort of armor they're wearing or if they're wearing none at all. So there's so much to think about in any given fight. Learning how to lock on efficiently is key in mobs and in 1v1s as well. You can go lock-free, and at times that is useful, but generally you want to be circle strafing enemies, trying to get a backstab in when they make their big moves. All while watching your own stamina bar to manage your blocking and duck and rolls. And you'll have so many stamina recovery standoffs as you try and get some room to breathe, or if an enemy's just baiting you and you're baiting them. But when you get everything just perfect, the timing, the weapon, the situation, and you can take down an enemy in 2 quick hits without even getting hit yourself, it just feels awesome. Weapons and armor affect your equipment weight, and this is very, very important. If you're holding more than 50% equipment weight, then you can't do a fluid duck and roll. You'll duck and roll and kind of crash to the ground. So you need to manage this to your own playstyle. If you like just taking damage, then wear all the armor you can, but often it's better just to go a bit nudie. Here's my streak from Demon's Souls. Suck it, dragon. Can't burn me. Although it did burn me about 20 times. The class you pick early on is kind of like a difficulty setting, but it doesn't really matter that much because your stats will change as you progress, so you can craft any sort of character that you want. Souls are the currency of this world, and you collect them from dead enemies, but you can also find little consumable souls lying around the place. Gear, stats, weapon upgrades, everything is traded in souls, and it can be really tough trying to work out where you need to put them. It's even harder if you accidentally stab and then kill 2 vendors, which I did.
You've gone mad, have you?
And that made the game really hard.
It's you lousy rat. Yulia!
But I like the stress, and I highly recommend taking regular pain breaks. In Demon Souls, you could use a lot of exploits to kill certain enemies if you wanted to by glitching them into a corner, stuff like that. I'm sure that'll be here too, but here I found there were more environmental ways to kill people, such as luring someone into fire, or dropping a giant gate on their heads. Look at them walk away, like it's no big thing. Developer From Software have set out to make a tougher game with Dark Souls, and I think they've done that, mainly because there are such long stretches between you and the bonfires and lots of nasty enemies in the way, but also I think some of the AI has been improved in certain areas. The good thing is you don't actually feel cheated when you die in this game. Every single misstep or death can only be blamed on you. You either left yourself open, didn't think hard enough about a fight, or just lost your footing. The key to what makes this game work is threat. It's really core to the game. That threat level is always high. You can't even pause the game, so even the menus are stressful. There's so much risk in losing all of your gathered souls when you die, and if you can't get back to that point, then they're gone for good. So there's even more stress trying to get back to it. There are still some rough edges to this game, especially in the AI. You'll notice a few enemies hugging the wall or attacking walls when they really should just circle around and come and get you. That was a bit disappointing, but where the AI matters is in the combat, so that part is still very strong. Also, enemies still get caught around your feet, but I find that funny. Sadly, we couldn't take our code online, which is a real shame because Demon Souls had some really unique online multiplayer features. You could see people who have died before you. You could co-op to take down a boss, and even break into other people's worlds. Dark Souls plans to have all of that and more. Dark Souls fills an important spot on the game store shelf because it enhances the range of experiences available to us gamers. The sad thing is, until the developer starts to teach gamers how to play this game better, especially early on, it might just stay in that cult following, and it's such a shame because you really come away from this game feeling like you've learned a skill and you've actually achieved something. If you let this game beat you down on those first few early hours to the point of quitting, then you'll miss out on one of the most truly fascinating RPGs out there. I'm giving this 9 out of 10 rubber chickens. Alright, back to it.
So did you guess the game for this week?
Prioritize that stealth jet's safety until it's on.
It was Armored Core 4 by Dark Souls developer From Software. This anime-inspired action game for the PS3 and Xbox 360 was a frenzy of futuristic mech combat.
Coming up on next week's show, we check out the latest Pro Evo and FIFA and see how they stack up against each other.
And we'll be taking aim at id Software's latest Rage.
Plus, Goose will bring us a digital essay on how gamers and games are represented in TV and film.
Till next time, gamers, may all your games be good ones. Hex out.
Bajo out as well.